Greetings and welcome to another Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team video, where today I'm going over my Angels of Death guide for Kill Team. But before getting into things, please remember to like and subscribe as well as comment. Let me know what you thought of today's video and if you found it useful. And remember, I've got a Discord you can check out for free in the episode description below, an affiliate link at Emerald Games, and an affiliate link and discount code at Crossfire Games, and a Patreon if you want to give me some more support. But yeah, today I'm going through my Angels of Death Kill Team guide, where I'm going to show you everything about the Angels of Death to help you win with them and do better with them overall. So let's get into it. So who are the Angels of Death? They are effectively the starter Space Marine kill team, which you can find in the Kill Team starter set. There's 6 operatives of Primaris Space Marines, which mirrors all other elite kill teams, and they're made up of models from the Justian kill team, as well as intercessors and assault intercessors. But if you want a more in-depth review going through like all their abilities and everything else, I'd check out my review, which I've done for this kill team already back when they first came out a few months ago. So for the Angels of Death strengths, they're generally, everyone has 14 wounds with a 3-up save, which is very durable. And, you know, everyone's also free APL, so you have free action points, which is very good. It's the standard Space Marine thing. Then you have the Astartes faction rule. So this lets you fight twice and shoot twice with your bolt weapons. So you can fire a grenade and then fire a bolt pistol or bolt weapon, which normally you can't do. And your sniper and heavy bolter can fire twice, but the second time they fire costs 2 action points. So they would use all the action points for shooting if you wanted to fire twice. And the most important thing, you can counteract on conceal. Now, this doesn't mean you can then charge from conceal. You're still limited by your order, but being able to counteract while on conceal means you could move up 2 inches, do a mission action. Very useful. You also have lots of access to easy rerolls, as well as with dice fixing abilities from your purity seals, which is very, very good, which means a lot of the time you're going to be very reliable even if you roll badly. And they are quite reliable with solid strengths. They're quite basic, but they are very dependable. As I said, with the rerolls and fixing abilities, it means most of the time you're going to get 3 to 4 hits every time you shoot, and you're usually getting 1 to 2 saves regardless every time you make a save roll. They've also got flexible chapter tactics. Now, you have lost some. You have only, I believe, 6, but they're still very good depending on how you pick them. They have powerful unique operatives, so they don't have many unique operatives, but those that they have are still quite powerful, including having the best sniper in the game. And they are quite low mental load because they don't have many abilities or auras. You don't have too much to track, and it's quite basic, which is very, very good when either you're a new player or you're playing long format tournaments, because it means you don't have to worry about, as I said, always pre-measuring ranges, remembering what triggers from what effect. So very, very good. And they have powerful bolt weapons. Like, they generally have the best bolt weapons in the game, which makes sense for the generic Space Marine team. Now, for the weaknesses, they are only 6 operatives. So 6 operatives is still quite limiting, even though elites in general are very powerful at the moment. They have basic melee operatives, excluding the leaders. So their leaders have amazing like melee rules, but their generic melee operatives are just dudes. They're just dudes with a chainsword and bolt pistol. That's it. No unique special abilities, which makes them kind of bland and lose out to other dedicated melee operatives. They have no access to piercing 2, which is a good thing, but also makes it quite hard for them to deal with other teams in general, and they struggle into some of the other elite teams, notably pretty much all the Chaos Space Marine teams, because those are a lot more powerful because they have more unique abilities and rules, so they can just do more things, and a lot of them have access to piercing 2, which is quite damaging to this team, or lots of access to piercing 1, because you have no way to negate piercing like some other teams. And you have fixed chapter tactics in tournaments. So if you're playing casually, you can always pick 2 different chapter tactics every time you play. But when you're playing in a tournament, you're fixed with your chapter tactics, which can be very limiting considering they're currently the only kill team in the game with this kind of restriction. It helps keep them quite level-headed, because if they could switch chapter tactics every game, they'd be way too strong. But it is quite a big downside considering no other team has this at the moment. Going into more specifics, we have which bolter to take. Now, when you, unless you're selecting bolt pistols, who all have piercing 1 crits, you have 3 different kind of bolt weapons. You've got the auto bolt rifle, the bolt rifle, and then the stalker bolt rifle. Now, when you're selecting these, if you build them from intercessors, you can, they have all different types. Generally, I would just say, tell your opponent what you're taking each game. Doesn't matter what they look like, as long as generally, if they're all the same, let's say you're just running everyone who can take a different bolt gun all runs the same bolt gun every game, just tell your opponent what it is. But if you start going like, oh, this one's going to have like auto bolt rifles, one's going to have a stalker, and one's going to have a bolt rifle, and they're all differently modeled, that's when it comes into confusion. But generally, if you're running them all the same, it doesn't matter what model you take as long as you tell your opponent. But if you are planning to play in events and you're planning to take different types of bolt rifles each game, in terms of like mixing 2 or more types of bolt guns, I would recommend modeling those either via magnetization or having different types. But first we have, which I think is the best, is the Stalker bolt rifle. So this has the heavy profile, which is 4 attacks, hitting on freeze, 3-5, heavy dash only, lethal 5-up, piercing crits 1, and then you've got a mobile profile, which is 4 attacks, hitting on freeze, 3-4. Now before you didn't have a mobile profile, you just had heavy dash only, but I think it's the best because generally if you are firing, you are going to be in good positions, you set up where you want to be, and then your 3-5 now instead of just 3-4, lethal 5-up, piercing crits 1, depending on what chapter tactics you have, you're taking severe with your shooting, but that's just really good because it effectively gives your team access to permanent piercing 1, and even if they ignore piercing your 3-5, it's very, very good. And if you have to be on the move, you can just use the normal profile, which is 3-4. Now, if you're playing on Gallo Dark or in closed environments or opponents who ignore piercing, I would say take the auto bolt rifle. It has torrent 1, so 4 attacks in on freeze, 3-4, torrent 1. But when you're fighting on Gallo Dark or shooting into enclosed environments for strongholds, you get lethal 5-up, which is actually pretty good. And especially if your opponent bunches up, you do have torrent 1, so you can effectively hit people within 1 inch of the primary target if they're valid targets, which is nice. But as I said, it's quite good on Gallo Dark, as well as if you think you're playing on Volkers where most of the action, let's say 2 strongholds are in the middle, or there's 1 stronghold in the middle with an objective, and you think that's where all the fighting is going to happen, then I would take more auto bolt rifles. Unfortunately, bolt rifles can be taken if you just want to be a general mobile shooting team, but your opponent doesn't ignore piercing. But they are now the weakest option. They're just 4 attacks, hitting on freeze, 3-4, piercing crits 1, which isn't too bad. But as I said, generally, if you're going for the piercing route, the Stalker bolt rifle is better because it's just more damaging. And yeah, you know, you can just walk up, shoot someone with a bolt rifle, and if you roll a crit, you're piercing 1, or if you've got severe, which is nice. But I just think the Stalker bolt rifle is the better shooting option, and then you can flex between the auto bolt rifle and like Gallo Dark. I wouldn't really take the bolt rifle. Next, we come to the chapter tactics. This is basically kind of the crutch of the team. So you can select a primary and secondary, and it's really important you remember which one is which, because the secondary is one you can switch with adaptive tactics every turning point for a CP. The way I go about it is I select one which I'm never going to switch, and then the second one which is good for in general, and then that I will probably switch depending on what my opponent is taking or what I'm facing. So first up, I think this is the perfect all-rounder where you take mobile. So mobile lets you fall back for 1 AP less, so you get to fall back for a single action point, and you can perform the charge action while within control ranges of enemy operative and can leave the opponent's control range to do so. So what you can effectively do is if someone's trying to pin you by charge blocking you, so charging and passing, you can just fall back as a normal move for 1 action point and then shoot again or shoot twice. Or if you're a melee operative, if someone's trying to charge block you, or you can like leapfrog, so you can charge someone who's activated, their next turning point, if they haven't fallen back or they've just passed, you can then charge out of their control range into another enemy operative's control range and fight again. This is, I think, the best. It's so powerful and really, really good because other teams have to pay CP to do this. And then as the secondary, I'd take Resolute. So you ignore any changes to your APL stat. This is actually super rare, and I believe they're currently the only kill team in the game that ignores APL stat changes kill team wide. So this is very good, as a lot of people still like to take stun grenades and have abilities that reduce your APL. So this is very, very good. But as it's the secondary one, this is one you could switch around depending on your opponent or what you're playing or each specific turning point. Because what you can also do is run this, and then like your opponent doesn't select any stun grenades, then from turning point 2 onwards you're spending a CP, but then you can change it to something more useful. This is what I think is really good for tournaments because it's just really flexible. You don't have any of the other strengths of the other chapter tactics, but you don't have any of the weaknesses. You're just a good solid all-rounder. Then if you're going shooty, I would take sharpshooter as primary. So whenever this operative shooting and during an activation was then charged, fallen back or repositioned, your bolt weapons have severe. So remember, you can then charge, fall back, and reposition after, but this is really good, especially on your Stalker bolt rifles, because it effectively gives them an auto crit, which makes them, you're always pushing for at least 1 dice of 5 damage and makes you piercing 1. So very, very good. And then for the secondary, depending on what you want to play more, I would go with Stealthy or Siege Specialist. So for Siege Specialist, your ranged weapons have Saturate, so they don't allow your opponent to retain cover saves. But Stealthy is when an operative is shooting this operative, if you can retain any cover saves, you can retain 1 additional cover save, or you can retain 1 as a crit instead, and it isn't cumulative with cover from Vantage. So basically, this is like ideally for shooty. Personally, I prefer Stealthy with Sharpshooter. So you're just turning point 1, you're setting up into position, and then turning point 2 onwards, you're shooting. And remember, after you've shot, you could then charge onto a point or shoot once, then move and boop a point. So very, very flexible. If you're going for melee, I'd recommend taking Jeweler as your primary. So one of your normal successes can block 1 unresolved critical success, unless the enemy weapon has brutal, or one of your critical successes can block 2 normal successes. So this is very, very good. This is really, really useful, especially if you're into dedicated melee teams and you just want to out parry them. And then you've got Aggressive, and Aggressive gives rending to your melee weapons. Also very good, but this is if you're going directly melee. And as I said, you can change your secondary with adaptive tactics every turning point. So they are quite limiting, but they are very powerful. I don't really like Hardy. Crit saves on 5 isn't that great. Otherwise, I think this is the best selection of chapter tactics you can go for. For your key operatives, you have first off the Sergeant. So starting off with the Assault Intercessor Sergeant, you're either taking them with the Plasma Pistol and Chainsword or Bolt Pistol and Power Weapon. Personally, if they have more than 8 wounds, I would take the Power Weapon and Bolt Pistol. But if you're into 8 wounds or less, I will take the Chainsword and Plasma Pistol. Because your Plasma Pistol is now weaker, but when you overcharge, it does make you 4-5, lethal 5 up, which is quite useful, piercing 1 into 8 wound or less teams. But even then, I still prefer the Power Weapon just for the lethal 5 up and 4-6. I think it's more useful, especially as the Plasma Pistol isn't as good anymore. But yeah, generally, if you're running into elites or more than 8 wounds, I'd take the Power Weapon and Bolt Pistol. Otherwise, the Plasma Pistol and Chainsword. They're great to dedicated melee teams. Remember, he grants the Assault and Tactical Doctrines for free, which is really useful into matchups that you're planning to be in a lot of assaults with, especially into Inquisitor agents, because they then can't counter your, they can't stop your doctrines, and you get a dedicated 3rd chapter tactic. So this is in addition to your normal 2. So what you can do if you've taken like the general all-rounder, I would probably give the Jeweler trait to just the Sergeant, because your Sergeant is going to be in a lot of melee. That's the general way I would run the Sergeant, well, the Assault Sergeant. For the normal Intercessor Sergeant, I would always take the Power Weapon and Stalker Bolt Rifle, but Bolt Rifle of your choice, but generally Stalker. The thing is, it can take different weapons, but it'll be 4 attacks. And generally, this guy is really good because the Power Weapon is still 4 attacks, hit on 3s, 4-6, lethal 5 up, and you have a crazy bolt gun. You could go Power Fist, but now you hit on 4s. It's not as great at 4 attacks. And it's great for when you're running primarily a shooting kill team. It makes Devastator and Tactical Doctrines free, as well as its own 3rd unique chapter tactic. And if you've gone with the all-rounder, I like giving him Sharpshooter because he's just going to be standing shooting people. And the great thing about him, he actually gels well with melee operatives because he makes Tactical Doctrines free as well, not just Devastator. You do kind of get it with the Assault Intercessor, but then the Assault Intercessor skews more into melee, whereas the Assault Intercessor Sergeant normally can kind of do the job of the Assault Intercessor. It's just got 1 less attack. So you can kind of cover both roles just with the Intercessor Sergeant. Then you've got the Space Marine Captain, who's generically like the best balanced leader for mixed teams, as he has a Just Doctrine for 0 CP every turning point. So what makes him really good is once you've done all your melee operatives, all your shooting operatives, you can activate him and switch it from like Devastator or Tactical to Assault and then start buffing those operatives. He's got the Iron Halo, which makes him very tanky. So once per game, he gets just a scratch, so he can ignore 1 normal damage, which is like 1 normal attack dice damage, which with his 15 wounds is really, really powerful. And he is one of the few operatives in the game that hits on 3s with his Power Fist. So he's 5 attacks hitting on 3s, 5-7 brutal, which is very, very good. Coupled with his Iron Halo, it makes him a real slug for melee teams to deal with him. And he has a Plasma Pistol which hits on 3s. But personally, I would generally take the Captain most of the time because he synergizes with a balanced kill team loadout. Then you've got your Grenadier. You always take this guy because he comes with free crack and frag grenades that hit on freeze and are unlimited. He's a bolt pistol and chainsword, so he's a more unique melee operative, but he gives you effectively a free equipment choice, which is really good. Then you've got the Eliminator Sniper, who is the best sniper in the game pretty much, but only 12 wounds. He can ignore obscuring for an action point, which lasts until he next activates, and has permanent silent on all his profiles. He ignores, as I said, ignores obscuring, and he has Seek-like profile, which is really, really powerful. It's only 3-4, but having a Seek-like profile allows you to dominate on boards, namely Gallo Dark and Beta Decima, where this guy becomes super toxic, and he can potentially fire 3 times a turning point, because you can fire twice for 3 action points, and then you can counteract to spend a CP to give yourself ignore obscuring and then shoot again, because you can counteract on conceal and he has a silent profile. The other thing, he comes with stealthy himself, so he automatically has the stealthy chapter tactic, which is really, really good. It doesn't stack, but it just makes him really difficult to shoot. And then you've got your gunner, who has an auxiliary grenade launcher. He's just something you also take all the time because it has another source of reliable piercing 1 or blast 2 due to the auxiliary grenade launcher. So he's always going to fire at least 4 attacks hitting on freeze, 4-5 piercing 1, or 4 attacks hitting on freeze, 2-4 blast 2, which is very, very useful. For your equipment, purity seals are something you always take. They're once per turning point, but when you've got 2 or more misses, you can discard one to make the other a hit, but it provides so much reliability. With your doctrines, you're basically going to have balanced and then the ability to turn a miss into a hit, well, as long as you roll 2 or more misses, which is really, really good. You've got chapter reliquaries, so this is another auto take due to making Wrath of Vengeance 0 CP while you have an engage order. It's even worth taking into elite matchups, because even if your opponent suddenly gets like the lead via alphaing you and taking out readied operatives before they can activate, you being able to do a 2 action point counteract is so powerful. Then tilting shields, I would always take if your opponent has lots of melee operatives with rending, lethal 5-up, or other ways to generate crits. This is because it makes your own operatives super durable, because they only get to retain crits if they've rolled a 6, which is very powerful, and it now works on any friendly operative of your choice. You don't have to dictate which operative has it. It only is once per turning point, but it means if you haven't triggered it, and you get to see it after dice rolls. So if your opponent just rolls 6s, you can go like, oh, they don't roll any 6s or no lethal 5-up or no like abilities to trigger. You go, I'm not triggering it. And it makes the captain and all your other operatives really difficult to charge. So very, very good. The Auspex I would only really take if you're going with the shooty route or the opponent has a lot of access to obscuring, because you have to be within 8 inches of the target to negate their obscuring for your team. It's not as good, so I wouldn't always take it. And then generally you're taking 2 light barricades, usually taken on non-Vocus maps, the safe staging points on objectives. 2 smoke grenades, probably taking these most of the time. So you're taking purity seals, chapter reliquaries, tilting shields, and smoke grenades, because it's essential into pretty much every team, as well as like brave shooting operatives of your own. And then if you're going for a 5th equipment choice, I'd probably take 2 ladders, but this is generally on Vocus, because usually you need it to stage, but this is generally all the equipment you're taking most of the time. For Tac Ops, they have access to security plus seek and destroy, which is fine. Security is generally your better option because it doesn't require killing, it just relies you staging and being alive. So for contain, it's good, it's reliable, but easily deniable. It's better against elite matchups as well on Gallo Dark, because it's harder for your opponent to push up. Because remember, all they have to do is get within your territory to knock it down to 1, and then get within 6 of your drop zone to knock it to 0. So it's not amazing, and more people have learned how to play around it, but it's a reliable option if you're trying to play it safe. Then you've got Take Ground, which is generally the best option. It's really good on Vocus and Beta Decima, because especially if you get inside a stronghold, you can just dump Marines in there and secure it. On Beta Decima, even if the platforms or gantries are partly within your opponent's territory, because they don't have to be wholly within, it makes it really easy for you to score this. And then it's even useful on some Gallo Dark maps, because some maps have 2 or more doors either on the center line or very close to it. So I would generally say Take Ground is the better one. Then you've got Secure Center, which is another very reliable option, but it's better on Vocus, because Vocus usually has places to stage safer on the center line, whereas in the center. Then you've got Champion from Seek and Destroy. This is the best Seek and Destroy Tac Op. You take it versus elites, in my opinion, if you're not going the security route and you have ways to ensure you kill. or 7 and 8 wound hordes, because you're usually in a position to either charge, fight, shoot, or charge, fight, fight. You can take overrun, but I would only take it into hordes, and it's great for aggressive players, especially if you're like running a lot of assault intercessors and melee operatives. And then you've got storm objectives, which you never take because it's so unreliable and your opponent can just like deny it, so they can effectively stop you scoring it quite easily by just staying off the points, which, you know, you would go, oh, it means they're not on the points, but then they just shoot you because you're in the open on a point. So it's not great at all. For the Angels of Death tactics, if you want to play like this is fine, but turning point 1, you can do Devastator Doctrine, either spending the CP or using the free scouting option to make it free. And then from turning point 2 onwards, you could go Tactical Doctrine. If you think your opponent's being quite defensive and turtly, turning point 1, then turning point 2, you could go Devastator. Then from turning point 3 onwards, you go a Tactical Doctrine. But this is what you would generally do, especially if you're using the Intercessor Sergeant, because your Intercessor Sergeant just does this for free. Then I would generally do And They Shall Know No Fear from turning point 2 or 3 onwards to ignore injury. I actually like doing it turning point 2, especially if I know I'm quite close to my opponent, because it means even if I have killed someone and like no one's wounded, it means even later in turning point 2 when I'm doing counteracts or my opponent has like alpha striked one of my readied operatives but hasn't killed them, it means I don't have to worry about that too much. I'm still hyper efficient. It just costs a CP. But if you want to play it safe, you can do it from turning point 3 onwards. I prefer doing it from turning point 2. Then also, if your opponent is a very shooty team, I like doing Indomitus from turning point 2 onwards, or turning point 3 in general, because remember, if you are going to get shot a lot, Indomitus allows you, if you roll 2 or more failures for making saves, you can turn 1 into a success. So make sure you always gain at least 1 to 2 defensive saves when you're being shot at, which is just boosting your durability. Then you've got Adjust Doctrine for free with the Captain when he is activated. So for example, you activate him to switch from your Tactical or Devastator Doctrine to Assault once all your ranged operatives have activated, and you plan on using your remaining melee operatives next, starting with the Captain. You can spend a CP to do this if you're not running the Captain, but because your Captain does it for free, it allows you to be way more flexible, and you can even like fake out your opponent, where you start with all your melee operatives, then activate your Captain and switch to like Tactical or Devastating just to get more boost with the shooting. Because remember, Tactical is if they're more than 6 inches away, and your leader can still proc it with Devastating because pistols are 8-inch range. So it was something to remember there. Then you've got Shock Assault with the Power Weapon or Power Fist to instantly kill a 7 or 8 wound operative, as long as you've rolled a crit. But also useful to win melee exchanges due to added shock. This is once again if you've rolled a crit, because it means, especially if you're in a dead heat with melee, being able to strike with a crit and then parry it, block out another strike is very useful. But because you get +1 damage, it's also useful to get unique breakpoints. Let's say you need to do 5 damage, but you've rolled a 4 and a 6, but you want to kill your opponent before they strike back. You can spend a CP to now make that normal do 5 damage, which is very, very good. Or even if you've rolled a crit that does 5 damage, and they have 6 wounds left, you can spend a CP. So very, very useful there. Then, as I said, you've got Wrath of Vengeance, which is free with engaged operatives because of your equipment, but it's great for the sniper because your sniper can fire twice, and then when it counteracts, it can spend a CP on Conceal to do a second action point, so it can basically give itself Ignore Obscure and then shoot again, or just shoot again normally. But it's also really useful for engaged operatives who can then counteract charge for 2 inches, and they just have to end up within 1 of control range, so they have like a 2.9-inch charge, and then they can fight. So very, very useful because it catches people off guard. And then you've got Counteract Guard, which may not last. This is mainly on Gallo Dark. So what you can do is like move, like you could charge, fight, go on guard, or even move, shoot, go on guard, do your guard shooting, and then when you counteract, you can counteract to go on guard, which is crazy. That may not last, but it's a very powerful thing Elite Space Marines can do. Then you have to remember to use your counteracts on Conceal/Engage to get more movement or mission actions. Now remember, as I said, when you're counteracting on Conceal, you can't charge or shoot unless you have Silent for shooting. But it's very useful because what you can do, you can actually plan where you're like, okay, I'm only repositioning and dashing 9 inches, but with my counteract next, I can then move an additional 2 inches, so that makes me move 11 inches altogether. So just remembering to keep track of doing that and who's done it, because each operative can only counteract once per turning point. And then when you're using your smokes, it's charge, fight, smoke. So you charge someone, kill someone, drop a smoke on your feet. Or you move, shoot, kill someone, and then drop a smoke at your feet. So remember when you're dropping smokes, with 32mm base operatives, if you put 2 models base to base and you put the smoke token just in the middle, it will cover both. So you can use a smoke to protect 2 operatives, but this is where you're getting the most out of your smoke grenades. You could replace it with stun, but generally using smoke grenades to keep you safe, because your opponent has to get within 2 to negate it if they don't have ways to ignore obscuring, and it just makes it means if they're within 2, you can then counteract and shoot them, or now another friendly operative can reposition and dash, get within range and shoot them or charge them. So very, very useful overall. For how to collect, first is the Kill Team starter set. You have to buy the Kill Team starter set to get all the Justine models, because they're very useful. And then you want 5 Assault Intercessors and 5 normal Intercessors. So the Assault Intercessors will allow you to build 1 Grenadier, and then you can use the melee options from your Assault Intercessors to build your Sergeants. So from the 5 Assault Intercessors, you can build a Sergeant with a Chainsword and Plasma Pistol, and then a Sergeant with a Power Weapon and Bolt Pistol. And then you can mod another power weapon for the Intercessor Sergeant, or if you're not building the power weapon Assault Intercessor Sergeant, you can give it to the Intercessor Sergeant, or give him like a scabbard sword, sorry. And then you've got the Intercessors who can build everything else, because the Intercessor will have the Gunner Grenadier with the Auxiliary Grenade Launcher, and that gives you everything. So the only problem with trying to get the 5 Assault Intercessors and normal Intercessors is either you have to buy 2 full 10-man boxes of each and split them with a friend, or eBay them, which is not too hard. You can also use the Black Templar Primaris Crusader Squad, which is what I did, but you are lacking some options, namely the Auxiliary Grenade Launcher, because I had to also get normal Intercessors, but you don't have any bolt rifles or Stalker bolt rifles. You just only have auto bolt rifles, so it's something to be aware of. You do get a nice mix of chainswords, power weapons, and bolt pistols with the Black Templar set, but you can't build everything. You basically need the Assault Intercessors. And like what you can do, if you get enough chainsword parts, you get a guy with a smoke grenade from the starter set. If you cut off his bolt gun armor and replace it with a chainsword, that can count as your grenadier, but it still requires you like raiding bit boxes and stuff. So they're a bit awkward to collect when you want to expand, but that's how you can do it. Then for operative selection, so you've got 3 different ways to select operatives for this kill team. First, you've got the shooty way, which is the Intercessor Sergeant with power weapon and a bolt weapon of your choice, the Grenadier, the Sniper, the Gunner with a bolt weapon of your choice, and then 2 Intercessor Warriors with bolt weapons of your choice. Generally, as I said, you're going Stalker bolt rifles or auto bolt rifles, but this is your ideal shooty loadout. Then for melee, you've got the Assault Intercessor Sergeant with either Plasma Pistol or Power Weapon. Then you've got the Grenadier, the Sniper, the Gunner, and then 2 Assault Intercessor Warriors, because you're just running in for melee. And then you've got the mixed loadout, which is the Captain, the Grenadier, the Sniper, the Gunner, then either 2 Intercessor Warriors or the Intercessor Warrior and Assault Intercessor Warrior. You could do 2 Assault Intercessors, but I don't think it's worth it. You're trying to maximize the ability to shoot, then do melee, because if you've got the Captain, the Grenadier, and an Assault Marine, that gives you 3 melee operatives and 3 ranged operatives. But you can also get away with just having the Captain and the Grenadier as your melee operatives and have everyone else on ranged, because remember, when you need to activate your Captain and Grenadier, you can always just switch to like Tactical or Assault for free. So those are things to keep in mind. But those are the best free loadouts. You know, I haven't talked anything about the Heavy Intercessor with Heavy Bolter, because I don't think he's great. Like, he can reposition 4 inches and then dash 3 inches and fire as Heavy Bolter. Or he can fire as Heavy Bolter and fire like static twice at 18 wounds. He's okay on some boards, but I don't think he's optimal at all. And you can't take him if you take the Sniper. And the Sniper is just always better, even at 12 wounds. So for hard/bad matchups, there are a lot, and this is before the balanced data slate, so this may change. Currently it's Legionary, because Legionary are tied for best kill team in the game, along with Warp Coven and Nemesis Claw. So the key thing with Legionary and Nemesis Claw, they have better melee operatives, but they also have access to melter guns, which you hate. Legionary can also ignore piercing, so get around your main tricks, and then Warp Coven just do everything, whatever they want. Corsair, Void Guard, and Hand of the Archon are tough because they have access to 2 AP2 weapons, well, 2 piercing 2 weapons, which is very devastating, as well as with Corsairs, if they're not shooting, they have power weapons, and Hand of the Archon have decent melee weapons. Void Dancer Troop are quite good at taking apart intercessors because they have a fusion pistol and a piercing gun and lots of tricks as well. Inquisitor agents, because currently they can take 2 melter, 2 plas, and a melter mine and just shut you down. Kazakin, because they have a melter gun, a plasma gun, grenade launcher, and then usually the hot shot las volley, which is piercing 1 as well. Tempestus Aquilans, because they have access to piercing 1 and then a melter bomb and melter gun, so very devastating. And you can't really engage them safely until turning point 3. And then you've got Halfkin Salvagers because of all of their access to piercing 1 as well. Very terrible shooting teams for you to deal with, as well as lots of tough melee teams. Now, it's like some of them are like effectively very bad, and it's namely Legionary, Nemesis Claw, Warp Coven, and Inquisitor agents, but all the others are just hard. Blooded are also a notably difficult matchup, but it's kind of up in the air how that works. Then for the Angels of Death overview. So they're a really solid starter team. They're very good for you getting the basics with Kill Team, but they don't have the highest skill ceiling, but they still have some kind of depth. I think the best loadout personally is always taking the Captain, but you still have the niche loadouts depending, like if you're playing on Beta Decima, I would go the shooty route because you'll just dominate everyone. And then maybe on Gallo Dark you can go the assault way, but I think mixed is better on Gallo Dark. And the Captain just allows you to flex more because once again you start off in Tactical or Devastator, and then when you need your melee operatives to start doing work, you switch to assault for free. So very, very useful. It's also got an Iron Halo. It's got a Power Fist. Very, very good. You also have the best sniper in the game who just destroys everyone, especially on Gallo Dark as well as Vulcus. They are quite basic and they can be more difficult to play and collect when you try and expand into them just because of how awkward it is, because Games Workshop haven't released a box which is 5 assault intercessors and 5 shooting intercessors as a single box. Maybe we'll get that when the Space Wolf box happens, but otherwise they're still very, very good. You have lots of freedom for how you want to paint and collect. Like, you don't have to paint them as Ultramarines. You can do them with those chapters. I've seen them as Death Watch, which is really, really nice, as well as Blood Angels and Dark Angels. But they're also just very reliable and dependable. You have your Doctrines giving all your attacks effectively balanced. And then you also have Purity Seals. You have ways to counteract that 2 APL, which is very, very good. And then also you have Indomitors to make sure you're always getting at least 1 defense dice or 2 when you're making saves, which is very, very good. And they're just quite honest and reliable. Chapter tactics, especially if you're playing in a tournament, you have to learn which suits you best. But I'm always still a fan of mobile and then ignoring stun. But remember, you have to make sure which one you've taken as your secondary to swap each turning point. But they're just very reliable. They'd probably be too good if you could pick your chapter tactics every game. And I think the biggest adjustment people are going to have with Angels of Death is when they go from playing casually at club nights, pickup games where you're changing your chapter tactics every game, to when you go in a tournament and you're locked into 2. You do have some freedom when your sergeants can pick a unique third one, but that's why this is where it becomes the most difficult. Well, it's the most difficult part of the team to play because you're currently penalized where other teams aren't. So hopefully they kind of mirror the choice for this kill team onto other kill teams to make it more, fair. But it is a big hurdle for this team. But otherwise, I think they're just really solid. They're great for learning the game, and you can still get a lot of depth out of them the more you specialize into them, just because they're dependable and reliable. And I think they're actually quite good into long format tournaments, just because they don't have much mental load. You don't have to worry about, as I said, auras, making sure stuff is within range of each other, and that stuff triggers other things like, oh, I need to do this because you trigger this ability, so now I need to do this ploy and then this. They're just very basic and dependable, which is good. They're still better than they were last edition, but currently they're one of the weaker elite teams just due to how powerful the other elite teams are. But I still think they're really, really fun and really, really good. And I also think they're quite good into Plague Marines because you have lots of access to Piercing 1, and you can take the Auspex grenade, the Auspex, to just get within 8 and turn off all of their obscuring, so you can just shoot them up. You don't really care about getting into melee. You're just running and shooting, and then you've got a captain to fist them if needed. So yeah, I just think they're really, really good and fun to play, and definitely a good starting point if you're a new player. But that's pretty much it from me today. Please remember to like and subscribe as well as comment. Let me know what you thought of this guide. Let me know if it was helpful and if you think there's anything I missed out. Remember, I've got a Discord you can check out for free in the episode description below, an affiliate link at Element Games, an affiliate link and discount code at Crossfire Games, and a Patreon if you want to give me some more support. And I'm just going to quickly shout out my patrons. So for my adepts of the crit, I have Zombie Businessman, Tom, Super Cow, Sam, Nick, Mercenary Q, Mr. Meatwad, Lucas, John Thomas, Jeremiah, Graham, Fangzu, Draken, Dave Meatswell, Darcy, Dowda Goldens, Chris, and then for my veterans of the crit, I have Sandra and Mark. So thank you so much for all your support. It really means a lot to me and helps support the channel. But yeah, this is my first of many how to play guides coming out soon. It's more in depth than the reviews, but still missing out parts I don't think are useful. I'll be doing more once we get the Valence data slate, which is hopefully next week or at least a lot of time before LVO. Let's not have the doom timeline of February or March. But this is, yeah, I'll be doing more. It'll be doing more. I tried to go with a team that is popular, but also is very likely not to change. I think the only thing that could change with Angels of Death is, one thing I'd be interested is if the warriors, so Intercessor warriors got ceaseless when in the tactical doctrine, and Assault Intercessor warriors got ceaseless when the Assault doctrine is up. So you get this really nice, makes them more unique as generic warriors. But I don't think that will happen. And even if that happens, it just makes them even more useful, which is great. But remember, no matter what Space Marines and chapter tactics you're running, there's always a chance to win, as long as you can roll a crit.